Thank you, Chairman, and I welcome the Department of Education, Bus Éireann and the Department of Transport here, and say at the outset, I have to say, it is a good system, the rollout of the bus service for school. I availed myself for secondary school in 1968, a good few years ago now, and it was a great scheme that was rolled out, but there's always a but, and I'm a rural TD, and every August onwards, or July, August onwards, I have a headache. I'm from Kilkenny, and a headache I have every year as a public representative with concessionary tickets in particular, and that's where I'm going to dwell on a lot on it today. As I said, the service is good, but for people that are left behind, it's not, and that's the problem we have. And there's a lot of problems out there, and I have them on a daily basis for months and months, and still come to me. Even last week I had a person in here in the Dáil from my own constituency with 4 children. The problem is nowadays most parents are working nowadays, and it isn't like years ago where there was one parent staying at home and there was one breadwinner and then one staying at home. It's all changed now. Both parents have to work now, and their children are going to school and to try to get them to and fro. And we did some research. When I say we, the Fianna Fáil party did some research, I think in 2016, the general election, and I think we did it again. We updated this year, and we're told that 350 concessionary pupils didn't get the services this year, and I'm told by our researchers that 4 million would cover that. 4 million would cover. Now that's simplifying it. I know there's other. For you to roll it out, it's a different job. But 4 million is small money in overall. I know it's just taxpayers' money, but small money overall. And I think the Department of Education should look at this again, and the Minister should look at it. I'm at the Minister the whole time, and continuously at him with years and years to bring in some. I think there was a recession, and we did make changes to the rules back in 2009 or 10 or something like that, and changed the whole criteria. But now that we're out of recession, we should review it again and look back at it, and look after these 300, if I'm right about the 350 children that are left behind this year, I'm told, and look after them and try to include them in the service overall. And I just want to ask you a comment on that first before I start to ask the questions. So I go to Mr. Foghlú.
Thanks, Deputy. I suppose that the issue about concessionary is a key part of it, and how we organise the scheme on the basis of eligible pupils first and then concessionary pupils. All pupils are supposed to have applied for transport by the end of April, and then all payments are supposed to be made by towards the end of July. And the first problem we have is that people don't necessarily all apply on time and don't necessarily pay fees on time, and that's a challenge in terms of organising the routes. But then when you get past that, we obviously, Bus Éireann on our behalf, have to organise the routes on the basis of the people. They start on the basis of the people who have applied, and they implement them on the basis of the people who have paid. And then once all the eligible who have paid have filled up the seats, the remaining seats are available for concessionary. And there are a large number of concessionary children travelling on school transport. It's in the 17-18 school year, just over 27,000. This year there were just around about 3,000 applicants who applied for concessionary transport who didn't receive concessionary transport. Of those, just 1,129 applied on time but didn't secure a seat, and 1,888 applied late and didn't receive a seat. So it's just around about 3,000. Now we're speculating on a scheme here, and look, it's a matter for a government to make policy, but I don't mind just taking this a little distance, I suppose. If we were to have a scheme where concessionary transport was available to everyone, I think we would have a different number of applicants. I think that those applicants are on the basis of the scheme we have at the moment, not on the basis of a putative scheme that may provide transport for all concessionaries. We were very conscious of this being an issue. Obviously, in the establishment of this government, we had a review and we published the outcomes of the review. And we are continuing further work in relation to the nature of concessionary. And is there any way we can seek to meet some of the need that has been identified? For example, if there's if not for individuals, but if there's I suppose a large group of concessionaries seeking to go a certain distance who may already be eligible for school transport. So we are exploring options in that regard, and yes, they would cost money. I think they probably cost more than the figure you've referred to, because obviously you have to organise transport. But we are looking at that. But one of the tensions we have in the scheme is we have a scheme where costs are going up, especially on the special education side, and we also have a tension, and it's an appropriate tension, to provide a social service to people who want to have it, and that's the tension always. And we want to make sure that we strike the right balance, and that balance is obviously in the rules of the scheme and so on. So yes, we recognise it's a difficult issue, but I'm not sure it's as small as you've set out, and I'm not sure it's even as small as I've set out, in terms of if we had an open choice to be transported anywhere up to a certain distance limit, that could actually cost a huge amount of money. But obviously there may be room to develop the scheme slightly, and we're looking at whether that's a possibility, and that would obviously cost money if we were to do that.
Well, when I'm saying those ways, I just give you an example. I keep giving you examples from my own position. I suffer myself from going through is that, there's a bus in Paulstown, a little small place, and there's 40-seater bus. Now, there's 7 children left there, going into Kilkenny, and I left there. It wouldn't cost an awful lot to make it a 50-seater bus. And look, I'm just giving you examples. I don't agree with the concessionary as the criteria is laid out. There's changes made. It's not your fault. Or that's made by us here in here as politicians. The concessionary, I take our schools. I'm from a little place called Ballahale in South Kilkenny. In 1968, the schools were amalgamated. 3 schools, all amalgamated into one. For 30 years, or 40 years, there were no problem. The school amalgamated, everything worked. I'm talking about primary school now. Everything worked beautiful. And then all of a sudden, these changes were made. And I and grandchildren now are going to that school, but they're being told after 40 years getting that service in one parish continuously, they're being told because of the changes made here that they should go to a different parish because the school is nearer. Now that's crazy stuff. That doesn't work if you know the loyalty of parishes in rural areas in particular. I'm not talking to all rural areas, but this is basically where I'm coming from. If you know the loyalty of your parish, even religious-wise, you're born, you get baptised, confirmation, communion, everything. And all that's going on for generations. And you try that. You're hurling, football, whatever you soccer, whatever you play, the sport is all to that parish. And then to come along, well, one strike with a pen up here, we make a change in 2010 or whatever, 11, whatever it was made. And we tell them, after 3 generations at this stage of getting service, I told them, oh no, you must go to your nearest school, which is, I measured a quarter kilometre, one family with 3 children were told they have to go to a different school out here outside the parish, completely. You have no, we all know one another, but the loyalties to your parish. And they're told because of this criteria. And you're splitting siblings, you're splitting brothers and sisters. Tell them 2 that were in early are going to one school, and then telling the next lot that they must go to an outside parish out here, which is nearer by kilometres, but it's not nearer in any other way. So, that's a crazy situation. I think we need to review this. I'm not saying it's your fault, it's we need to review it. I'm asking the Minister to review it. I'm asking my own party to review it, and I'm hoping that we will get a review shortly. So, can you make a comment on that?
I don't want to comment about individual situations, but I'll comment about the situations in principle. If we were to say to Bus Éireann, you can run bigger buses where there isn't enough eligible pupils for them, that's a policy change that costs money. It can be done, but it's a policy change that costs money, and it would have to be applied across the country in all areas where we have to have a consistent national policy. So yes, that could be done, but yes, it could cost a lot of money because Bus Éireann run buses of different sizes at different times. So yes, it can be done, but yes, it could cost a lot of money. In relation to the amalgamations, I think that the policy view was taken arising from the VFM and there's a very good example in the VFM actually of a few schools who happened to be in the same Catholic parish, and they were Catholic schools, where parents were living closer to one school, but only could get school transport to the school further away. To be honest, we can't set a scheme in stone in relation to amalgamations which were made 50 years ago.
We did for 40.
We did for 40, but you can't set it in stone, and it was reviewed. The other thing is, this is about school transport. Parents can choose to send their children to other schools if they wish. I know there are challenges on parents to get students to different schools and transport and so on. This is not requiring them to attend school. Parents can choose which school to attend, obviously subject to there being places in schools. This is about the availability of school transport to support that. I would draw that distinction because I think it's an important distinction. But if we introduced and kept the level of choice to allow people to go to somebody under the former closed or close school rule, as well as the closest school, which was the policy dilemma, we would then have a myriad of choice, and a myriad of choice on transport costs a huge amount of money. I think it's a reasonable policy to say that the state will support a child to go to their nearest primary school. And if a parent wishes to choose them to go to a different primary school, that's a reasonable choice for a parent to make, but it's a choice that the parent can make and arrange it themselves.
Would you not think there should be some recognition of parishes, in particular rural Ireland, in the criteria laid out? I understand, I'm not talking about children or parents that want to pick special schools for their children and want the state to pay for it. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about going to a primary school here, where there's only one primary school anyway in the parish, having choices. But and after 30, 40 years of the grandparents, parents, and now grandchildren, and all of a sudden they're being told, no, it's closed. It's closed. I think there's actually a right to those people to get the same service as they were promised in 1968, and they had for 40 years, and now it's changed by a stroke of a pen. I said up here. I think that actually, if someone went to court and brought to court and say, well, that's why we always went to school, right? I think the government would be bound by it.
Yeah, nobody is saying that they can't attend school. It's the availability of a service.
I'm talking about the school service. I'm not talking about individually. I'm talking about the school service, the bus service.
The policy doesn't recognise parish boundaries of the Catholic Church. No. And
I'm talking about Catholic Church. I'm talking about all churches now.
Well, then the parish boundaries. I mean, then you'd be into a myriad of different boundaries, depending on what the religion was. I don't think that's a reasonable thing for the state to do.
Actually, I don't want to go in personally, but there in Kilkenny there's another school because of another faith that is getting that privilege and being brought to it, and it's causing a lot of anxiety. And I don't want to go into anything personal here. It's causing a lot of anxiety in where there is another faith getting the service, and only of that faith is being brought to it, and I think that's wrong too, and it's causing a lot of problems in my area.
Well, I mean, the scheme at primary level allows for children to attend the nearest school of their choice, whether it's multi-denominational, Catholic, Protestant or Irish medium. So I think it's reasonable that it's a reasonable policy that the state would support the provision of children to their nearest school of whichever those types they wish to attend.
Okay, I'll move on from that. The 190 million, I think you said, was the cost for 2007. Are we getting value for money at 190 million? And I want to speak about the surplus here. You know, okay, you said you won't have any surplus in 2019, I think, but you had it in 2015, according to the Controller and Auditor's General Report here. A surplus, that sounds like profit to me, and it's a crying shame if you have a surplus and a profit, and as I said, I'm going back to the same thing again. There's many, to a couple of hundred children left out there, and there's stuff left over and couldn't be used to bring these children to school to cater for them, instead of having a surplus and have a profit. Is a surplus a profit?
I'll take this first step, Mr. Kent, if that's okay. We have a transport management charge, which is part of the fees that we pay, the cost that we pay to Bus Éireann. But there's no profit. Everything is assigned. There was a reserve held, which was held by Bus Éireann and referred to in their accounts in latter years, which was assignable on agreement by us to certain costs, and we made the call this year that we wouldn't let them retain that anymore, and that has no longer been retained and won't be retained for them by the end of 2018. So there was no profit in the scheme. It's a scheme on the basis of cost recovery in terms of expenditure.
Well, Bus Éireann are rolling out the scheme, and they're subcontracting a lot of buses, you know, for private individuals. Are they profit? Are Bus Éireann making a profit and run the scheme? And it's been said, I'm not saying it, I'm saying it, but it's been said that their coffers are a lot richer because of the bus scheme and the rollout of it. And I want to go for a step further. I want to ask, you know, it's a monopoly when there's only one service provider, and that's Bus Éireann. Would we get further value for money if we opened it up to contractors, even private contractors? Because you are actually subcontracting from Bus Éireann have the major contract, but they are subcontracting in for the routes. The routes are given out. I know plenty of them around Kilkenny and Carlow and everywhere. Would the government not get better value, the department not get better value if they just directly went to subcontracting and put it out for tender and see who comes in at the best price? And would that not save us money at 190 million? You know, when you have a monopoly and when you have no one to compete against, to me it doesn't sound like good business. And this service level agreement that you're talking about, you know, even the Controller General questioned that. He questioned about the service level agreement when his report up to 2015. I'd be questioned now as well. And I always think to myself, if we even got a sample of put it out to public auction there to see who come in at the best prices, we might get a better service and maybe a cheaper service. And I just want to comment on that.
Can I take this first as well, if that's okay, and maybe Mr. Kent could come in. The department engages Bus Éireann to basically look at the applicants, look at their routes, look at the tendering, and so on. So there's a whole transport infrastructure management expertise that Bus Éireann has, and that's why we work with Bus Éireann to do that. And within that, then, I think it's really important. Nearly 83% of what they do is on the basis of procuring out. So 83% of the money we give to them, they procure out, and they do that efficiently, and they follow public procurement in doing that.
How do you know when you haven't anyone else competing for?
No.
How do you know you couldn't get a better value if you went out? If you went out, just say you put out to a private contractor there to compete for say Kilkenny, just Kilkenny alone. You just put out a private to provide the service for 12 months, and then let Bus Éireann and the private contractors or contractors go bid against it and see who come in the best value.
Well, Bus Éireann aren't bidding to provide transport to Kilkenny. Bus Éireann are working out the routes and then procuring for services, majority externally for services.
But couldn't the private contractor do that as well?
It would take a national organiser to do that on that basis, and there's no alternative national organiser that we see. And given that the bulk of what Bus Éireann do is outsource in terms of procuring, which they procure to government procurement standards, so there's no question about the procurement, I think, by Bus Éireann of the services. I think the value for money question, and I think that was really helpful that was confirmed by the Controller and Auditor General. And we get updates and sign-offs and reports from Bus Éireann to confirm that's the case. And we are looking at other ways that we can confirm that's the case. So I'm not sort of saying that we just take it on their word forever, but we have to look at it. But I don't see an alternative national organiser to step in and organise all of those services and to procure and to work it out. However, we are undertaking the audit of routes, and we'll look to see, when we look at the audit of routes, which I referred to in my opening statement, and moving from there, we can then see if that informs any other policy choices. Of course, there are policy choices, but at the moment, our very strong policy option is to work with Bus Éireann as the route provider, provided that it's outsourcing the vast majority of the services as it does. So the private sector is hugely involved in school transport.
That's the point I'm trying to make. I mean, your Bus Éireann really run the system for you. Could not the Department of Education run the system directly and put it out to tender without the Bus Éireann? Well, I mean, it's a second layer of bureaucracy that could be avoided and better value for money. I'm just a layperson asking these questions, but I know I'm a businessman as well, a farmer, and I know when I'm trying to get a price, I always put it out to 2 or 3 people to see which is the best price, and that's how I work my business and try to get value for money.
Yeah. I don't believe the department should do the route work. I think there's a transport expertise which is unique to Bus Éireann. There's route design, there's ticketing, there's a whole range of things that as a department we don't want to be involved with. We have, if you like, set up agencies to provide state examinations, to do the work of the NCSE. We set up one on education welfare that's now within TUSLA under the Department of Children. So I don't believe that the department itself should be undertaking that work. Having Bus Éireann, and given the extent to which they outsource in the first place, it's the transport management expertise that they have that I think that's vital for us and very important for us. And what we have to do in value for money terms is ensure that we understand and all of the costs and are on top of all the costs that their accountants are signing off, and that we are checking as appropriate, and that's part of the service level agreement and so on that we've discussed, and a number of other matters.
Can I ask Bus Éireann to comment on that?
Well, there's 2 things, because you asked about value for money and that, and you also about are we making a profit? Yeah. And the 2 things we want to say is 90% of the routes that we operate are put out to tender. So they're put out completely in compliance with EU guidelines. They're procured, and anybody who gets to operate them have won them on a competitive basis. So that's the first instance. And the second is that 83%, as I said, of all of the costs associated with the delivery of this scheme at the moment actually go back to the contractors. They come through the department, they're passed through us, and they go out there. So that what we end up doing from our perspective, when you ask about it, this company has been through, as you probably know, Deputy, a radical transformation even in the last couple of years, And we continue to take on board a lot of the findings that we have. We have a transport management charge that tries to recover the indirect costs. It's fallen almost every year. It's fallen from 11.2, and as part of the transformation that we tried to do again last year, because we've had to try and continue. This year, it'll be of the order this year of about 10.5 million of costs. And that goes to cover everything for all of the indirect costs that surround the business, and that's put in there. We try to deliver and utilise it and get as many double trips into the business as we can, into every single route, and that's an important point. Because
just explain to people what do you mean by a double route? Just
a double trip.
Double trip.
You might get the same bus to operate a run to the primary in the morning, but also to do the post-primary as well. So rather than
so they do 2 runs in the morning and 2 runs in the evening.
Correct. Rather than
Primary and secondary.
Yeah, and that obviously, in certain instances, leads to, more capacity on the first bus, maybe, and less on the second. But from our experience, it's cheaper to still do that. Better value to the state to do it rather than be contracting 2 separate vehicles and different contractors to do it. So there's value delivered on that. Then, of course, that we continue to try and utilise the capacity. So even though, as you say, there's concessionary there, we do try to make sure that where we're taking it in, there's a contribution coming back into the value of the route, because again, those students again are having to pay and to utilise it, and that contributes to the value of it. What we're doing more, as you say here, is value. We're never stopping. This is a new management team here again. We have a school transport officer just in place, and what we're undertaking again is a full structural review within our business of who's delivering it. And of course, we have delivered a lot of the services directly ourselves with our own Bus Éireann fleet, bus over drivers over a number of years, supported by a lot of clerical administration staff. Now we're looking at the full needs of the scheme in conjunction with the department, particularly as we've recognised that as special education needs has grown, some of the assistance that we've had to do in that has to grow. But again, we haven't actually, you don't see that cost coming up. If anything, you're seeing everything that we're charging through what they call the school transport management charge, which is almost a misnomer in a sense, because it's a recovery of all your indirect costs of providing the service. But that is coming down year on, all since 2008. So to your point, I can categorically state that we operate this on a cost recovery. There is no profit at the moment in this for us, which is another matter for us, but that's within the scheme. So there's no cost. We operate this scheme at the moment on a cost recovery, and where there have been surpluses from one year to the next, they're identified, completely ring-fenced, and then brought to the department.
Does it go back to the taxpayer, or do you keep it in?
Back to the department, and at the department's discretion.
Okay. But am I finished already?
Yeah, time flies. You might get back the second time.
I just want to know about the Controller General, the 80%.
Yeah, sorry, just split.
Yeah.
Back to the department.
Yes, we have to return the surplus to the department if there's any surplus in any one time, and that's the way it operates. So the CNAG report did identify a surplus. It's gone back. But sometimes, as we said here, sometimes depending on where you are, that surplus has been used, if the department agrees, where we've either needed to invest in a technology system or where we've had to invest in more customer service support systems, and we just bring that to them and they decide whether we're allowed to do it or not.
I have to stop quickly because I might try.
That's question.
Only comment.
I clarify that the alternative, if that's okay, that surplus has been returned to the department, netted off this year for the first time. Previously it was held by Bus Éireann on an annual basis, but it's been netted off and returned to us for the first time this year.
The only comment I'd make, and again it's coming back to what I said at the beginning, is that parents out there tearing their hair out to get children to school, and there's a surplus left over that's handed back, and I think it should be utilised. That's really a personal opinion. It should be utilised to look after the parents that are really in need of transport. Okay. I just want to go to the spare capacity that Controller General there, 80%. In 2015 it was now 80%. That seems spare. That means 20% capacity is there spare. That was 2015. What's the situation in 18 and 17, 18? That sounds extraordinary to me, that there's spare capacity of 20% left and not utilised, and we have the situation that we have. That's according to Controller General in 2015.
Yeah.
Who am I speaking this to? You or?
We do take that, Maria.
I suppose just to qualify what constitutes spare capacity, and both Stephen and the Secretary-General have touched on it already, what we try and do is ensure that we get the maximum utilisation out of all the vehicles. So in that case, we have 95% of Bus Éireann vehicles that are operating more than one trip morning and evening, and we have over 60% of contractors. So what that means is that while their capacity may exist in one trip, you're actually still getting a more cost-effective network for the department and better value for money itself. And I suppose just to assure you that where capacity does exist in a particular route, it is fully utilised in terms of any demand that exists out there for concessionary transport. If there is demand for concessionary transport, any spare capacity or places that are available are actually allocated on that basis. And this year we have probably the highest number of concessionary pupils travelling, because we're in the region of 28,400. So as I said, we do aim to try and utilise the capacity as best we can, but we also have to look at the capacity in the context of the value for money that it provides and the actual utilisation we get out of the individual vehicles. I suppose one other point to touch on is that you're always going to have an element of spare capacity, because if you have 35 eligible children presenting for travel, you have to procure a 50-seater vehicle. So as I said, you are going to have cases out there where there's always going to be a certain element of spare capacity that exists anyway. But, you know, the key priority for us is to look at it in the context of the amount of utilisation we can get out of the vehicle, the cost that would incur to the state if we had to procure a separate vehicle. So they're actually looked in tandem, the two of them, the actual utilisation and the efficiency of the cost.
Jim, this brings me to seat utilisation, and this is a survey that was done in Kilkenny as well by parents, and I'm talking about what I call whoring of seats, and this is a big issue in where I come from, rural Ireland or whatever, and these seats are actually tickets allocated. I've got the answers several times from Bus Éireann for everyone else, but the seats being allocated and then they're not being used, and they're being hoarded. And they did a survey below on this same bus in Paulstown, I'm talking they're into Kilkenny, and they did a survey for a month after this year. 11 seats were available every single day that they did the car. 11 seats, passing off 7 children that were left to the side of the road. 11 seats were available, going in and coming home. They did this survey themselves. Hoarding of 11 seats that are not being used. I know parents may be going to work and bring in their children, and it's only for the rainy day when they can't go, they use these seats. That is terrible. There should be something done about that, where you have 7 children being passed off left on the side of the road and 11 seats empty going off into and just saying Paulstown to Kilkenny. And just giving examples. I don't mean mention my own area all the time. And I think that's a crying disgrace. It's a crying disgrace to see that 11 seats are there, 7 children left on the side of the road and going in and out, and they did it for a month. And it was on average 10, 11 seats every single day. And I think Bus Éireann or the Department of Education should wake up and do something about this. If you don't utilise your seat within 2 weeks, 3 weeks, continuously, or maybe you have to make some allowances, but they should be taken off the people that are not using them. And they're just keeping for a rainy day that they can't go or something like that, or that the parents are not going to. I'm not saying what the situation, but maybe not going into Kilkenny for a work day or something like that, and then they use it that day. But to see 11 seats available continuously for a whole month, never used, and 7 children left on the side of the road, I think it's a disgrace and something should be done about it.
Okay,
I want to answer that. I know he's going to tell me. He's going to tell me that the seats are located as they come first, and that's not the answer I want. I want to tell him that the seats should be utilised. That's what I want.
I think there's a big child safety issue here, and I fully accept we have a problem that children don't use the seats fully, but I'm not going to do a Ryanair job on school transport and over-allocate the seats and maybe have a child standing at the side of the road.
It's not about over-allocating at all. He was saying, if it's the situation somebody has allocated a seat and a ticket, you have no method of knowing whether that's been used or not. And really, if you find after a full term it has never been used, that's it. Now, we're not suggesting you over-allocate, but we're just saying, if you had a system to get evidence of seats not being used. Okay. No, we're not talking about that at all. So, have you looked at that ever?
We have examined it, and we haven't found a way to do that. Different children use buses on different days rather than not using them at all, and that's the issue. So that Yes, it's possible that there may be, but then we're into that child may be sick from school for a period of time. So the amount of interaction required to manage that precisely gets very interventionist.
This technology you're mentioning might solve it. But if you say you've looked at it, will you send us the note or the information if you have looked at that? At least it will help us understand how you teased out that issue. We know unless there's a way of checking the pass going in, you won't know until you can do that.
In modern technology, even here, when we come in here every day, we have to buzz in. So I think in modern technology, you can just simply done in a bus, you press a button, I'm here every day, and just one. I mean, modern technology.
So I'm going on to the...
Remember, children could be sick from school, and there's a whole lot, and that requires a high level of interaction with the school.
No, I'm going on to Deputy Conley.
Will I be getting back in again?
No, you will.
First of all, I must compliment the department on special needs. It's fantastic service, and I have known from my own family one person, so it's a fantastic service, and fair play to you, rolling out a great service there. I just want to comment, we must have been harder on our times, because I was on a bus, we used to give an hour and a half to 2.5 hours to come home, so we must be harder in the 70s than they are nowadays. I didn't ever know anything about restrictions at the time, because every evening I came home to an hour and a half to 2 hours to get home. But we were damn glad to get the bus at the same time. Just on your comment about time and children, just a comment said there that I know where there's a full bus anyway, there's no tickets available. Anyone is late, even an hour is late, are finished for the year, because I was involved in several of them where they didn't pay over a weekend, they forgot it, and even an hour as case, and were just excluded for the year because they didn't pay in time. That's where the bus is full and the capacity is full. So there's no appeal system there. They were just ruled out. That was it, gone for the whole year until the next year. Most of them learned that. They all paid the year after, but that was a different story in time. I just want to say the notification to parents, that's a lot of frustration by parents. On a Friday, they might be told, school is open on Monday, happened this year, school open Monday morning, and they're told on Friday evening, no bus available. I think that's very frustrating to parents and to people in general, that they have to try to make alternative arrangements, as I said, working parents. There should be some kind of a system in place that warn them a month beforehand, say, more than likely your children will not get a concession, you will not get on the bus. I think something should be done about that. As far as the appeal system is concerned, I think there's no appeal system, because I've went through it on several occasions. I can give you several instances. There's an inspector comes out, he makes a decision in the story. And he might come out a second time if you go to him. In our cases in Waterford, we are covered from Waterford, but there's never a change. There's no appeal system, as far as I'm concerned, in place. It's just whatever decision is made by a person, it's upheld, and there's no comeback on it. And I can give you an example. One parent this year, there was a third of a kilometre between trying to put them to another school outside the parish and their own school in the parish they're in. A third of a kilometre, and where they were actually left off in the evening, it was par, level. I did it myself in the car, and I went to the inspectors, no give whatsoever. A third of a kilometre was between the difference where they were going to school all 3 generations, as I said, and they were being told to go into a new parish, a third of a kilometre, and where they were actually being dropped off was level, but for between both schools. No one had listened. No one, and this is just ruled out. The bus is full, ruled out in the story. And the other thing again is there was a health and safety system on a route that's going on for years. The guards were even asked by parents, said that this was a dangerous junction where the bus was turning. We appealed it on several occasions. The inspector came out 2 or 3 times and said, no, that's where they're turning. And I thought that was very crude, that they didn't take into consideration the safety aspect of it when they were turning, and people trying to drop them off in a bad bend on the road and drop off their children, are waiting for them, no place to park, no anything, and a bus turned on a turn, and got no hop on that one. But again, I don't think the appeal system is working. I think there should be a better appeal system in there for parents and for the like of us, politicians. Now, I just want to ask this one. I have called the Minister Halligan to amend the rule which states routes can be extended or altered. Additional vehicles will not be introduced, or will larger vehicles or extra trips using existing vehicles to be provided for catering for children travel on a concessionary basis to ensure that majority of children who apply for concessionary tickets are accommodated. I asked that to the Minister, would he change that rule? And I'm going to ask you, both the Department and Bus Éireann, in your opinion, from an operational point of view on the ground, would Bus Éireann be open to amending this rule, and would there be a significant additional cost associated with amending this rule? And just asking you that, I've asked the Minister, I've asked you, and you're sitting here in front of me.
This is a question.
And also a political question too.
It's a policy political question, and it's not for Bus Éireann. I didn't fully understand, but I think what you said was, could we put a bigger bus on? And I think
that could be one of them.
And I think the answer to that is, of course, a rule can be changed, but it has costs associated with it. In that instance, somebody would already have tendered and received a tender to provide a smaller bus. But of course, rules can be changed, but all rules like this have costs associated with them.
Right. Bus Éireann, have you any comment to make?
I prefer not to, because it is a policy decision.
Policy is
policy
exclusively
decision.
a matter for the department.
Just asking your opinion, would you think from an operational cost point of view?
Our issue is we will seek to service any and all demand if funding is made available.
Yeah, I understand this. The whole thing here is it's up to us ourselves here in Dáil Éireann to change the rules that have been changed, to get the change back. And that's why I'm asking you questions that I probably would have asked the Minister and I've asked the Government. And I've even asked our own party to make it part of the conference of supply to have it included. These small numbers are being excluded. And I know it's unfair to be asking you something that you're re-implementing the laws we're making. And I understand that. I've been told that every year. But unfortunately, when I have the opportunity, I'm asking you as well to see could you strengthen my arm. That's basically what I'm going to do. That's it, Chairman.